The CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Eric Severoid in Washington, Marvin Kalb in Washington, Morton Dean in San Francisco, Bill Plant in St. Louis, Richard Threlkeld in Khartoum, South Vietnam, Roger Mudd in Washington, and Bob Evans in Boston.
Good evening. Just 5 months after his appointment as ambassador to the United Nations, George Ball resigned today to work full-time for the election of Hubert Humphrey. CBS News diplomatic correspondent Marvin Kalb reports.
It might not have been a surprise to the president, who personally broke the news to the press, but it was to just about everyone else. And to stifle speculation that once again Ball was quitting for policy reasons, the president stressed that this time the reason was presidential politics. Moments later, at a State Department news conference, Ball himself left no doubt he wanted Humphrey elected because he has no faith in Richard Nixon's ability.
I frankly do not think that he has the qualities to be president of the United States. I don't think that he has the qualities of character. I don't think that he has the kind of settled principles which are necessary to assure that in the very difficult days which the United States is likely to face in the world in the next few years, that he is a man in whom the American people can safely repose their confidence. I think that the polls are clear that at the moment Mr. Nixon appears to be leading. I have great confidence, however, in the American people, and I think when they look at the choice which is presented to them in the next 5 weeks, that they will decide that they wish the leadership of Vice President Humphrey.
What seems clear tonight is that Ball's dramatic jump from diplomacy to politics represents a needed shot in the arm of the Humphrey campaign. A former law partner of Adlai Stevenson, Ball is a renowned dove on Vietnam who has long opposed the bombing of the North. Humphrey people now hope that Ball can serve as a link to the dissident Democrats and win them back, to help Humphrey to defeat Nixon. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, Washington.
To succeed Ball, President Johnson named J. Russell Wiggins, editor of the Washington Post. Wiggins, 64, is a past president of the American Society of Newspaper Editors. Vice President Humphrey today proposed an international peacekeeping force for Vietnam to guarantee free elections and the withdrawal of foreign troops. In the first major foreign policy speech of his campaign, Humphrey also said the American people don't want the United States to play the role of global policeman, and the rest of the world won't accept it. He spoke in San Francisco, and Morton Dean reports.
Ticker-tape parades are as familiar to San Francisco as hippies and hills. Humphrey's reception was colorful, but other politicians have received larger and louder welcomes. The candidate spending a considerable amount of time in California for the obvious reason that one of the state's most respected polls places him 17 percentage points behind Richard Nixon. In a speech before the Commonwealth Club, Humphrey outlined his strategy for world peace, including the use of UN troops in Vietnam as well as elsewhere.
The experience of recent years does, and I repeat, does suggest areas in which our foreign policy making should be changed and could be improved. I have said as a candidate, and sometimes I'm questioned a great deal by the media about it as to what I mean, that my first objective when I am permitted to serve this nation as its president will be to reassess, to reevaluate, to restudy all of our commitments.
On the issue of Vietnam, there is no evidence of any break between Mr. Humphrey and President Johnson. In 2 campaign appearances here in California today, Mr. Humphrey in no way suggested there were any differences between himself and the president over the handling of our affairs in Vietnam. In fact, on television in Sacramento, Mr. Humphrey said, "I am not going to repudiate President Johnson," and went on to praise what he called the president's rather good record in international affairs. Humphrey saying we're in there, in South Vietnam, in our own national interest. In the long run, he also said, the people will believe what we did in South Vietnam was right. Morton Dean, CBS News, with the Humphrey campaign in San Francisco.
Richard Nixon's major campaign appearance today was before a large group of non-voters. Bill Plant reports from St. Louis.
4,000 St. Louis area high school juniors and seniors took the morning off to hear Richard Nixon answer their questions. The first time he has done anything like this. He told them that he would debate Hubert Humphrey, but not Humphrey and Wallace.
This is a two-party country, and if we are going to avoid a constitutional crisis that could occur in the event that a third-party candidate who has no chance to be elected, but who might get enough votes that he would not make it possible for either of the other two candidates to get a majority in the Electoral College, and then it would have to go to the House of Representatives, I say that both Hubert Humphrey and Richard Nixon should do everything that we can to avoid that. Humphrey and Nixon should debate each other, but I believe that Wallace should run his own campaign, and that we should make it very clear that in this country we have become great and we will continue to remain great by being a two-party country rather than having third parties and fourth parties.
To a student who asked if he could look to the new Nixon for the leadership of the new politics, Nixon said,
that I have kept up with the changes in the world. I tried to communicate with the young people of the world, not just in the United States, but in Malaysia, in the Soviet Union. I've talked to some of them there, behind the Iron Curtain, in Western Europe and in Latin America. And I believe that through this constant education that I have been receiving of communicating like this with young people, that I know what the new world, the new generation wants. And if I didn't think that what I stood for represented the hopes and the aspirations, not just of my generation, but of your generation, I wouldn't be a candidate for president. And if I can't serve that way, I won't be elected, and I think I'm going to win.
The kind of reception Richard Nixon received from this high school audience is a phenomenon which delights him throughout this campaign. Most of these youngsters are white and middle class, and Richard Nixon's strategy to win is based on the hope that their white middle class parents are in the majority this year. Bill Plant, CBS News, St. Louis.
CBS News President Richard Salant today described a Federal Communications Commission inquiry into television coverage of Chicago convention disorders as immensely dangerous to the concept of a free press. In a speech in New York, Salant asked, are news judgments to be made finally by some agency of government? And he likened the demands for a government inquiry to the practice of ancient Persian generals who put to death messengers who brought bad news.
July 26, 1968. Something special happened. We took a crowd of Buick owners to a secret location to give them a sneak preview of the new 1969 Buicks. This is what they said about the sport wagon.
I really like that new door in the 69 sports wagon.
That's the whole thing for me.
The GS 400.
I don't know what I'd do to improve it. The looks, handling, performance. It's great.
About the Wildcat.
Well, I think that engine it will be respected, and maybe it'll even rule.
It's wild. It's really wild. I think that's about the best words for it. It's really wild.
About the LeSabre.
The LeSabre seems to be exactly what we're looking for.
I was quite impressed with it.
I'm for the automatic lock.
About the Electra 225.
There's a Buick I'd love to own.
Buick owners keep selling Buicks for us. Wouldn't you really rather have a 1969 Buick?
Senator Eugene McCarthy returned today from that vacation on the French Riviera, still silent on his choice for president. And he said he'll have nothing to say on this until October 8th, maybe not even then. CBS News reporter Norman Glubach questioned McCarthy at an airport news conference in New York.
Senator, it's been reported that you're trying to clear network television time in October. How are you going to use that time?
We may take a half hour sometime in October.
And for what purpose?
Talk about whatever needs to be talked about then. We're clearing it ourselves, though, not as part of anyone else's campaign.
Senator, looking at your view on the overall campaign, I was just wondering that this man Wallace is gathering such tremendous support on a particular theme that seems to have as its base hate. Does this disturb you at all as a primary candidate a few months ago?
Well, I think it's much fear as it is hate that he bases his appeal on, and either appeal of that kind, I think, is rather an intrusion into American politics. I'd rather not see it there. But there is some fear abroad. But if you don't turn it to hate, why, we can survive all right.
Chrysler today cut back planned 1969 car prices to come into line with Ford and General Motors price hikes. Chrysler's list prices now will go up an average of $52 rather than $84 a car. Ford and GM price increases are in the $50 range, and it's the third year in a row Chrysler has rolled back prices to match the other two. Living costs rose 0.3% in August. That's the 19th straight monthly increase, and the inflationary spiral, which government officials call the sharpest in 17 years, shows no signs of ending. The nation's cost of living is now advancing at an annual rate of more than 4%. Prices closed generally lower today on the New York Stock Exchange after 7 consecutive advances. The volume was heavy, almost 19 million shares. The exchange index lost 9 cents.
Said a singer recording one night, "I think that we need a rewrite. This harmony's bad. Something else pretty sad. This cigarette doesn't taste right." The drummer who worked with the band had smooth-tasting Newports on hand. "Here, try one, my friend. It's a fresh-tasting blend. That's why there's so much in demand."
Try a Newport, you like Newport. Smoother, more refreshing to your taste.
Hey, this taste really makes it for me. It's smooth like smoking should be. I go for this flavor. I owe you a favor.
How about a big chord in G?
Change to Newport. You like Newport.
Smoother, more refreshing to your taste.
King size or 100s. Newport smooths and refreshes your taste.
The U.S. command in Saigon released its latest weekly casualty report today, and it showed 290 Americans killed and 1,762 wounded. The South Vietnamese, who have been steadily increasing their role in the fighting, reported 473 combat deaths. It's the 9th week in a row that government losses have exceeded American fatalities. The enemy death toll was put at 2,867. In fighting today, communist forces fired about 20 mortar rounds into the U.S. Special Forces camp at Khartoum, 70 miles northwest of Saigon. But there was no repeat of yesterday's ground attack that cost the enemy 135 dead. A report on the aftermath of that battle, CBS newsman Richard Threlkeld.
Early in the morning, an estimated regiment of North Vietnamese regulars swept across the border from Cambodia 5 miles away and hit Khartoum, first with rocket and mortars, then with wave after wave of massed assaults against the barbed wire. The battle lasted till dawn, and though the enemy got inside the wire, the defenders fought them off. This is what they found in the morning: 60 enemy bodies only yards away from the command post. The commanding officer of the Defense Force, Lieutenant Don Giddens of Adel, Georgia, describes the fight.
The enemy was able to penetrate the northwest star point, but by the assistance of our organic or the weapons that we have in camp and a particular tactical situation or breakdown of camp structure that we have in our compound, we were able to contain the penetration force in the northwest star point.
Could you see them? What did they look like?
Most of them are clad in short type trousers and dark shirts. But when they start firing their rocket launchers and their new, well, I won't say necessarily new, but they're assault rifles, it's pretty easily to detect the sound that these weapons make. And right away, you know they're not friendly. They have to be the bad guys.
The attackers were well equipped. AK-47 assault rifles, rocket launchers and rockets, Bangalore torpedoes to blow out the wire, wire clippers, and even 2 flamethrowers they never got a chance to use. By morning, Khartoum was getting help. 3 companies of elite Special Forces troops flew in, complete with food and ammunition. But the communists were still around. Every incoming helicopter, including the one the CBS News film crew was traveling on, was mortared. In the late afternoon, the mortars finally found their mark. 12 Vietnamese replacements and 1 American advisor were wounded by an incoming round. And all the defenders lost 12 dead and 30 wounded this first day. And the feeling is that Khartoum will be getting more of the same. The North Vietnamese have withdrawn for the moment, while both they and Khartoum's defenders lick their wounds. They're supposed to be over there somewhere, perhaps in Cambodia a few miles away. But if the action around here the past few weeks is any guide, the enemy will be back. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, Khartoum, South Vietnam.
Saigon military sources said today that communist war supplies passing through Haiphong have doubled in volume since April 1st, when North Vietnamese port was put off limits to U.S. airstrikes. According to reconnaissance reports, the North Vietnamese have improved and enlarged Haiphong's harbor, permitting more ships to dock there. Israel's Foreign Minister Abba Eban said today that his government would not accept the new Soviet proposal for a Middle East settlement. Eban told reporters in Paris that the plan is identical to the one the UN Security Council rejected last November. Among other things, it called for Israel's withdrawal to positions it held before the June 1967 war with the Arabs. In return, the Arabs would end their 20-year state of belligerency with Israel. Eban said the proposal would do nothing to guarantee Israel's frontiers nor ensure its right of free access to the Suez Canal. CBS News diplomatic correspondent Marvin Kalb says U.S. officials reject the plan's one new idea, that Russia join with the Western powers in guaranteeing Middle East peace. U.S. officials, according to Kalb, say that would not work without a direct Arab-Israeli settlement. UN Secretary General Thant introduced his annual report to the General Assembly today with criticism of both the United States and Russia. He charged that the superpowers have been too prone to rely on strong-arm methods for settling international problems. Thant urged East-West Summit meeting aimed at resolving current crises and preventing new ones.
You people who want hours of relief from minor pains of arthritis and muscular aches, how many pain relievers do you know of that give you a second dose of pain relief before the first wears off? Measurin does. The first pain reliever with a built-in second dose. Measurin contains a double dose of aspirin in timed release form, so you take it just once every 8 hours instead of every 4. Convenient timed release Measurin with a built-in second dose for a long-lasting pain relief.
When you have acid indigestion, every second counts. So count on instant-acting Phillips tablets. Phillips tablets go to work in seconds. With one of the fastest stomach settlers ever discovered, each small Phillips tablet neutralizes more excess stomach acid than the leading antacid tablet that comes in a roll. So for fast relief from acid-upset stomach, when every second counts, count on instant-acting Phillips tablets.
In an almost empty Senate chamber, the filibuster against confirmation of Abe Fortas as Chief Justice dragged on today, and Roger Mudd has the story.
As the Senate's low-keyed, sometimes scholarly, always musty filibuster buzzed through its second day, Majority Leader Mansfield said today that next Tuesday he will force a vote on ending the debate. If that vote falls short of the necessary two-thirds, and it's expected to, Mansfield says he will make at least one more attempt at it because he said this nomination is of great significance and could be described as a clash between the executive and the legislative over the judicial. Mansfield said that because there has never been a filibuster against a nominee for Chief Justice before, we'll give it a little special treatment. Would that treatment include government planes sent out to fly friendly senators back to Washington for the vote? Said Mansfield firmly, there will be no presidential planes. With so many senators who would like to duck the vote involved in tough re-election campaigns, attendance next Tuesday will probably be down to 90. That means the opponents need only 30 votes, 1/3, to keep the filibuster rolling. And today, the opposition leader, Republican Griffin of Michigan, referring to his typed-out nose count, claimed 36 hard and fast votes. And no one, not even the friends of Fortas, is disputing Griffin. Roger Mudd, CBS News, Washington.
In spite of the filibuster, the Senate found time today to give final congressional approval for an expanded food stamp program for the hungry. The bill authorizes $315 million for the program for this fiscal year and $340 million for next year. Teacher and community disputes, many with racial overtones, have crippled a number of school systems this fall. New York City's school system, the largest in the country, is paralyzed by a teacher strike. Violence and disorders have brought individual school closings in such cities as Trenton, New Jersey, and Seattle, Washington. In Boston, there's been trouble, too. CBS News correspondent Bob Evans has been covering that for the past 2 days.
This is one evidence of the protest. A Black Power meeting yesterday in a Boston park. White reporters and camera crews were barred from the meeting. But the issues had already been well publicized. Negroes had demanded a student union at one high school and the right to wear dashikis, an African pullover shirt, to class. To some, this may seem a minor matter. But to Negro militants here, it is part and parcel of their demand for more black influence in Boston schools. After the rally, they marched to Jeremiah Burke High School. where State Representative Michael Haynes endorsed the demand for African dress.
Well, I can't see why anyone would make such a to-do over a dashiki, when a dashiki is just a garb that somebody is wearing.
The protest had spilled into the street. The several hundred protesters confronted by police in blue uniforms and police recruits in khaki. Stones and bottles were thrown, windows were broken. There was trouble elsewhere in the city. Altogether, 20 persons injured, 1 person dead from a heart attack. The demonstrators in turn charged police brutality.
When you're red man, like I had a police officer say to me, and I quote, "I am going to bust your head in if you don't get out of here."
There was no one that I saw struck by a club. When we got down here, there was 500 or 600 people in the street. And all the police did was restore order and seal off this street here as you see now.
Eventually, the unrest died down. And later, the Boston School Committee met to discuss school problems. Dissatisfied Negroes attended, still pressing their demands.
Yesterday, I came out with...
At times, the language became bitter, especially an argument between militants and School Committee Chairman Thomas Eisenstadt.
Wait now, sir. Because the hour... Sir, why don't you just shut up and let me finish?
Yes, I'm here. Don't you tell me to shut up.
I didn't tell you, sir. I asked you, sir. Will you please shut up, sir? I'm asking you.
Finally, Eisenstadt adjourned the meeting. The Negroes were not pleased.
Yes, this committee stands in adjournment, subject to the call of the chair.
Now you can see why the school was run so because the school committee hasn't got the time to listen to our students there to speak about the school.
The school committee chairman says there is more to the Boston problem than merely an argument over clothing styles.
It's important to note that a very revealing statement was made by Mr. Eartha, who is a resident of Newton, former teacher at the famous Meadowbrook School, now the vice principal of the so-called Liberation School in Boston, that it was his intention and the intention of those whom he purported to represent to overthrow, and these are his words, the school committee and the school system, and then dictate policy and give orders to us. So I think this is really at the root of it.
Black leaders had called for a boycott of school today, but school authorities reported all 202 schools were open, with attendance normal in the white schools, but some stayaways from the Negro schools. And even among those who came to school today, there was some sense of wonder at it all.
They talk about our dashikis and the hippies that go to that school, and, you know, all sorts of people like that, you know, with, you know, beads and all that. I don't know.
This dispute, then, is a commentary on the civil rights agony of America and how far it has moved over the course of the last decade. For this dispute has nothing at all to do with integration. Negro and white students go to school together here in Boston. But what is at stake is a matter of black identity, black pride, and how the Negro students choose to express it.
Governor John Volpe returned to Boston from Los Angeles, and his office says he's watching the situation. An Air Force Titan 3C today carried 4 military research satellites into space from Cape Kennedy and then launched them into separate orbits around the Earth. An Air Force spokesman said all 4 satellites are sending back signals and working fine. Russia complained again today that Czechoslovakia's leaders are not moving fast enough to return the country to the ideological course dictated by Moscow. Soviet newspapers charged specifically that the Prague regime has failed to impose strict press censorship and to carry through its purge of Communist Party officials considered anti-Soviet. Daniel Johnson, Premier of the Canadian province of Quebec, died early today of a heart attack. He was 53 and long had been a leader of conciliation efforts between French-speaking and English-speaking Canadians. Portugal's government formally announced tonight that Marcelo Caetano, a 62-year-old attorney, has been named Premier, replacing Antonio Salazar. Salazar suffered a stroke 10 days ago and has not regained consciousness.
Can the right denture cleanser really make a difference? Listen to what Mr. Bill Adler thinks.
I feel so sure of myself, knowing my dentures are really clean, odor-free, all because of Polident tablets.
Polident tablets fight denture stain and odor safely. Look, this denture material is covered with a tough food stain. Drop it into water with an effervescent Polydent tablet, and in minutes your dentures are cleaner, brighter, fresher. Get Polydent tablets.
Listen to all the ways Corriga Denture Adhesive helps people with loose, false teeth.
Corriga holds so tight I can eat almost anything.
Listen.
Corriga, nothing else ever got me through the day with such confidence.
Listen.
With Corriga, my mouth feels comfortable, tastes nice and clean.
New Corriga does so much, helps you forget you're wearing false teeth.
Now to Eric Severide in Washington for some observations on Democratic presidential candidate Hubert Humphrey's dilemma, the Vietnam War. Eric?
The extraordinary difficulties of underdog Hubert Humphrey reinforce the theoretical argument that the vice presidency is the worst of all positions from which to run for the presidency. Since the first decade of the 19th century, as we read the record, only two vice presidents have ever tried it, Van Buren and Richard Nixon, and only Van Buren succeeded. And the inherent difficulty is infinitely compounded when the candidate is tied to an unpopular president and an unpopular war. So a Niagara of private and public advice is pouring on Humphrey's head, much of it to the effect that he must break openly with the president and call for an immediate unconditional halt to the bombing of North Vietnam. This is put by various writers as a test of Humphrey's independence of mind and character, and their assumption is that a bomb halt is a closed question in the Johnson government. But there are respectable reasons for believing that Humphrey's current caution on this matter is founded on the fact that he knows what most of his critics do not know, that a bombing suspension is still an open question, with the president's leading advisers fervently split. Among those dead set against unconditional suspension are his generals in Vietnam and the Secretary of State. Among those for it are his negotiators in Paris, who are now convinced that Hanoi means just what it says, not only that nothing will happen in the direction of peace until a bomb halt, but that a bomb halt will lead to productive discussions. So it seems a reasonable conclusion that the president may yet order the halt before the election, though time is short if it's to be of any real help to the Democratic candidate. There is no blinking the fact that a bombing suspension may well cost extra American lives in the I-Corps region. But this has to be weighed against the extra lives that will be lost if the war goes on and on. Mr. Johnson has no intention of being the first American president to lose a foreign war, and he has every intention of leaving his successor with a strong military position in Vietnam. But if the bomb halt advocates are right, then he faces the prospect of history's judgment. He will have left a stalemated war, which he himself built up, to be settled by his successor, very probably Mr. Nixon, who is, or at least was, anathema to Mr. Johnson. Walter?
And that's the way it is. Thursday, September 26, 1968. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
$8,000, maybe more. That's what it takes to keep up with the competition. That's what college costs. What's the best kind of life insurance to have? A John Hancock man won't have any snap answers. We have so many different plans and options, he'll sit down with you and figure out exactly what you do need. Maybe it's a plan that keeps you covered even if you borrow on it for college expenses. Or maybe it's our new plan that lets you buy a modest amount of insurance now, but guarantees that you can get more later, regardless of your health. If anybody in this life insurance business can design the right plan for you, it's probably us.
John Hancock, huh?
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.